Autumn and breeze, town never changes. Sycamore leaves blanket the main street in a thick, tawny carpet, and the seasonal sunlight hangs thin and pale like a worn sheet of aged parchment. Every front porch in town is bleached white by years of wind and sun, stripped of vibrancy by the slow, unchanging rhythm of small-town life. People here don't build their reputations on talent or success. They build them on stories of kindness, devotion, and suffering. Ask any local resident who the most pitiful, virtuous soul in town has been for the past 3 years, and every single one will give you the same answer. Elaine, my stepmother. I'm Garrett Reed, 38 years old. I was 35 when my father passed away, and that quiet, unassuming autumn remains the darkest, most underhanded year of my entire life. It was a year of hidden lies, staged grief, and injustice that clung to my family's name long after the leaves stopped falling. My father was born and raised in Breeze Town, a lifelong building contractor who worked dawn till dusk with steady, uncomplaining diligence. Over 4 decades of honest labor, he built a stable, prosperous life for our family. 2 prime commercial storefronts on downtown Main Street, a spacious lakeside family home that had housed our clan for generations, and a sizable trust fund set aside for his later years and his children's future. My birth mother passed away from chronic illness when I was 28. Father lived alone for 2 quiet years, lonely but content with his routine, until he met Elaine through a mutual community acquaintance at the age of 60. 12 years his junior, Elaine had spent her early adulthood working retail in the bustling city, a career that had polished her most formidable skill, reading people, manipulating sympathy, and crafting a flawless public persona to mask private greed. In her first year of marriage to my father, she maintained an impossibly humble, devoted demeanor. She tended to his daily needs flawlessly, adjusted every detail of the household to suit his comfort, and presented herself as a grateful, selfless companion dedicated solely to easing his lonely later years. My sister Chloe, my brother Ethan, and I were all fully grown, with stable careers and independent households of our own. We never once coveted our father's assets. All we wanted was for the man who'd sacrificed everything for us to spend his final years in warmth and companionship. So we welcomed Elaine into our family with genuine sincerity, never suspecting the calculation lurking beneath her gentle smile. We would soon learn that companionship was never what she sought. She wanted every penny, every property, every last trace of the life my father had spent a lifetime building. 6 months before his passing, my father suffered a severe cerebral infarction that left half his body completely paralyzed. His speech center was irreparably damaged. He could only mumble broken, indistinct syllables, his consciousness flickering between clarity and confusion for the remainder of his days. Overnight, he lost all autonomy, unable to dress himself, feed himself, or move without assistance. In that vulnerable instant, Elaine seized total control of our household. She immediately collected every valuable document my father owned, bank cards, savings ledgers, property deeds, and the full trust agreement. She then wove a consistent narrative for every neighbor, relative, and acquaintance in town that father was mentally incompetent and bedridden, entirely dependent on her round-the-clock care, and that his 3 selfish, busy adult children had abandoned him, neglecting their filial duties for their own convenient lives. Small-town gossip never requires proof to take root. It only requires a persistent storyteller. Day after day, Elaine reinforced this false narrative until the entire town accepted it as unshakable truth. To everyone in Breeze Town, we were the ungrateful, absent children, and she was the long-suffering, selfless widow sacrificing her life for a dying man. For the final 3 months of father's illness, Chloe, Ethan, and I drove back to the lakeside home every single week without fail. We brought prescription medications, high nutrition supplements, cleaned every room of the house, tended to the yard, and did every chore we could to lighten the load. Yet Elaine always subtly blocked us from genuine, intimate care of our own father. She'd smile softly in front of watching relatives, her tone warm and forgiving, feigning endless patience. "You 3 have such busy careers and families," she'd say, her voice laced with manufactured concern. "The drive back and forth is exhausting. Let me handle everything here. I don't mind the hard work at all." Her words never failed to earn her waves of praise for her kindness and dedication. And every time, Those same relatives would turn to us with quiet disappointment and open condemnation, labeling us cold, ungrateful, and lacking in basic human decency. I noticed the cracks in her facade long before anyone else. I saw the quiet greed in her eyes when she sorted through my father's financial documents, the subtle impatience in her tone when she spoke of his tedious illness. But I refused to believe that the woman who'd shared my father's bed and home for years could be capable of deliberate, cruel exploitation. I clung to naive hope, telling myself I was merely overthinking, that grief and care wore on her nerves. In the rare, fleeting moments when father's consciousness cleared, he gripped my hand with all his remaining strength, his eyes wide with terror and helplessness. He'd mumble broken fragments over and over. Money, papers, wrong. He could not form complete sentences, could not articulate the injustice he was suffering, but I saw the panic in his gaze, the desperate plea hidden in his weakened frame. Even then, I comforted him, telling him he had nothing to fear, that I would handle everything. That was the last time I allowed myself to be deceived by mercy. Father passed away on an ordinary Wednesday morning, his death quiet and unceremonious, as if the world had decided to let him slip away without fanfare. Elaine contacted every family relative within minutes, every single one except my siblings and me. She deliberately delayed calling me for 40 critical minutes. I would later discover exactly what happened in those 40 minutes. While Father's body lay cold and still in his bedroom, Elaine locked herself in the study, finalized every forged legal document, patched every possible loophole, and cemented her scheme to seize every last asset my father had left behind. Those 40 minutes were not spent grieving. They were spent covering her tracks. At the funeral, Elaine perfected the performance of a lifetime, the grieving, devoted widow. Dressed in plain black mourning clothes, her eyes red and swollen with staged tears, she stood hunched and silent before the casket, trembling on the verge of collapse for hours. Every guest who came to pay their respects watched her with pity as she whispered broken, sorrowful words. "He went peacefully," she'd murmur to anyone who would listen. "I've spent every day and night taking care of him. It's been exhausting, but if he's at peace, every sacrifice was worth it." The entire crowd of friends, neighbors, and relatives ached for her suffering. They surrounded her with comfort and sympathy, patting her shoulders and praising her loyalty. Meanwhile, my siblings and I stood isolated and silent, marked with the unspoken label of shameful, unfilial children who'd abandoned their father in his final days. The night of the funeral, the senior elders of our family called an emergency household meeting. Elaine sat in the main living room central seat, a stack of signed legal documents spread neatly before her, her expression solemn and mournful, as if she were merely honoring my father's final legitimate wishes. "Before he passed, his mind was completely clear," she said, her voice thick with manufactured grief. "He signed this full estate settlement agreement of his own free will. All properties, savings, and trust funds are placed entirely under my sole management. He knew the three of you have stable, comfortable lives with no need for this money. He only wanted to secure a peaceful, comfortable future for me in my old age." Chloe's eyes filled with tears instantly. She leaned forward, her voice trembling with righteous disbelief, and challenged the lie outright. Dad couldn't speak a full sentence in his final months. His mind was confused and foggy almost every single day. There's no way he was lucid enough to sign over his entire estate. Elaine's response was instantaneous. She dropped her head, her shoulders shaking with quiet sobs, putting on the perfect display of a wronged, helpless woman. Before she could even defend herself, every relative in the room rushed to condemn my sister. They scolded her for being disrespectful to the deceased, for daring to question my father's final wishes, for persecuting the woman who dedicated herself to his care. Uncle Ray was the loudest and most biased of them all, his tone sharp and authoritarian, carrying the unassailable weight of senior family authority. Chloe enough. Elaine wiped his body, fed him, and cared for his every need through his worst illness. Which one of you three did that? Your father cared for his companion and wanted to provide for her old age. What's wrong with that? You're young, you have successful careers, and yet you're greedy enough to fight a helpless widow for his life savings. That's cold, ungrateful, and unforgivable. Every other relative echoed his judgment, one after another. No one allowed us a chance to explain, No one cared to hear our side of the story. In this small town, where personal reputation and public favor always overpowered objective truth, a perfectly staged martyr's narrative defeated hard facts without effort. With a few well-timed tears and calculated words, Elaine turned my siblings and me into the family's villains. I did not argue. I did not defend myself. I remained completely silent through every accusation, every judgmental stare, every unfair rebuke. I stared at my father's gentle portrait hanging on the wall, then at the faint, triumphant glint hidden in Elaine's teary eyes, then at the relatives who'd chosen blind bias over family blood. In that moment, every last trace of my goodwill and leniency burned away. I knew arguing was useless. Any protest would only solidify our reputation as bitter, ungrateful children throwing tantrums over inheritance. The meeting ended with an inevitable, unjust verdict. Every asset my father had spent his life building, 2 downtown storefronts, the generations-old lakeside home, all cash savings, and the entire 6-figure trust fund was legally signed over to Elaine's sole ownership. My blood siblings and I were effectively exiled from the home our father had spent his life protecting. As I walked out of the brightly lit living room that night, I glanced back one last time. Elaine sat centered on the sofa, accepting the family's consolation and praise like a newly crowned matriarch. We, the man's own children, were reduced to outsiders in our own home. Stepping across the threshold into the cool night air, I made a silent, unbreakable vow. I would not fight with words in the moment. I would fight for the truth in time. I would gather irrefutable evidence, reclaim every last ounce of my father's hard-earned legacy, tear down every layer of her fraudulent mask, and make the greedy woman pay for every lie she told and every injustice she'd committed. Chapter twist reveal. The entire family in town believed the estate's signature was a voluntary, lucid final choice from my father. Only I knew the truth. In his final days, Father's moments of full clarity never exceeded 10 minutes per day. He was physically and mentally incapable of reading, understanding, or signing a complex multi-page legal estate transfer document. The signature was fraudulent from start to finish. For the next 3 years, I allowed myself to become exactly what the town believed, a weak, resigned son who'd accepted his family's shameful fate and abandoned any fight for justice. Gossip lingered in Bree's town like stale smoke, thick and inescapable. The unified public narrative remained unchanging. Our cold filial neglect had broken our father's heart, driving him to leave everything to his loyal second wife. When I walked down Main Street, neighbors crossed the street to avoid me, acquaintances whispered behind my back, and every family gathering excluded my siblings and me entirely. We became the town's permanent cautionary tale of ungrateful children, branded with a baseless stain that poisoned our reputations for 3 long years. Chloe suffered the worst of the mental toll. She fell into constant melancholy, breaking down in tears countless times, begging me to fight back, to defend our names, to tell everyone the truth. Hot-headed Ethan grew increasingly furious, repeatedly planning to confront Elaine directly and demand justice with brute frustration. I stopped him every single time, holding him back with unyielding resolve. I explained to both of them, over and over, why silence was our only viable strategy. Impulsive anger will only make us look worse. The entire town has already believed her lies. Our explanations will sound like desperate excuses. Without ironclad, undeniable proof, patience and silence are our only path to victory. True retaliation is never loud or reckless. True victory lies in quiet accumulation of power, steady preparation, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike without failure. I never left Bree's town in those 3 years. I continued running my local architectural design business quietly and steadily, living a low-profile, unassuming life. Whenever I passed Elaine in town, I greeted her with calm, polite nods, never showing resentment, never mentioning the inheritance, never hinting at my ongoing investigation. I deliberately cultivated the image of a man who'd fully accepted his loss and moved on, slowly eroding every ounce of suspicion she held toward me. Gradually, Elaine dropped all her guards. No longer forced to maintain a humble, frugal facade for my benefit, she indulged every greedy desire she'd hidden for years. She traded her modest car for a luxury vehicle, filled her closet with high-end designer apparel, and took frequent out-of-state luxury vacations. She lived a life of extravagant comfort and reckless indulgence, all funded by my father's life savings. Yet in front of every neighbor and relative, she continued her award-winning performance. The poor, grieving widow struggling to get by on meager income, honoring her late husband's memory with frugal, humble living. The entire town bought every lie wholesale. Only I stood on the outside, watching her double life with cold, unblinking clarity, seeing every excess and every hypocrisy hidden behind her saintly mask. Privately, I contacted Mark Hayes, the most reputable civil attorney in Breeze Town, with 20 years of specialized experience in probate disputes and civil fraud litigation. Mark was known throughout the county for his rigorous precision, absolute client confidentiality, and flawless winning record. He was not flashy or charismatic, but he was incorruptible, thorough, and exactly the professional I needed to build an unbreakable legal case. In our first confidential meeting, after I laid out every detail of the story, Mark cut straight to the core of the case with the pragmatism of a seasoned litigator. Personal suspicion and emotional testimony mean nothing in court. Judges only recognize tangible evidence. Do you have proof of forged signatures, fraudulent coercion, or unauthorized asset diversion? I answered him steadily, with absolute certainty. I don't have finished evidence right now, but I can collect it. Give me 3 years, and I will build a complete, closed-loop evidence chain that cannot be refuted. For the next 3 years, I suppressed every urge for immediate justice, disciplined my emotions, and advanced my investigation step by methodical step, never rushing, never cutting corners. First, I legally obtained my father's complete official medical records from the county hospital, including detailed illness timelines, attending physician diagnostic certifications, and round-the-clock nursing logs. Every official document confirmed an unassailable medical fact. Father's cerebral infarction had paralyzed his right hand completely, eliminating all fine motor function required for signing legal documents. His cognitive and verbal abilities were intermittently impaired, with prolonged periods of mental confusion. Medically speaking, he was entirely incapable of independently reading, reviewing, or executing binding legal paperwork. This official medical certification became my foundational piece of evidence, legally invalidating the core claim of Elaine's entire scheme that the estate transfer was a voluntary, lucid decision. Second, through Mark's legal channels, I subpoenaed every bank statement, transaction record, and trust fund transfer log covering Father's final 6 months of illness and the 2 years following his death. The full financial trail exposed crimes far more egregious than I had initially suspected. During Father's bedridden, completely helpless final months, Elaine exploited her exclusive access to his finances to siphon funds in small, untraceable increments, deliberately avoiding large transactions that would trigger regulatory oversight. She used split transfers and third-party receivers to obscure the trail of her embezzlement, systematically draining my father's accounts while he lay paralyzed and unable to defend himself. The official transaction records told the full, damning story. During the 2nd month of Father's hospitalization, she secretly withdrew roughly $7,000. The 3rd month brought another $10,000 in hidden transfers. On the exact day of Father's passing, she drained an additional $21,000 in a single opportunistic withdrawal. In just 6 months, she embezzled more than $85,000 in hidden cash. Over the next 2 years, she continued cashing out portions of the trust fund, splurging on a luxury vehicle, high-value jewelry and designer goods, and a down payment for a vacation property out of state. Every lavish expenditure directly contradicted her public pretense of humble poverty. Third, the most critical piece of my evidence chain, I tracked down 2 key eyewitnesses who had been present every single day during Father's final illness, his full-time private nurse, and the household cleaning staff who maintained the lakeside home. The nurse provided sworn testimony confirming that Father's mental state was persistently unstable. He frequently failed to recognize his own children, never expressed any clear, coherent wishes regarding his estate, and physically lacked the ability to sign any document independently. The cleaning woman testified that she repeatedly witnessed Elaine alone in the home study late at night, printing legal papers and practicing signature forgery over and over, always ordering everyone away from the room to ensure total privacy. I brought both witnesses to Mark's law office to record fully notarized, Video documented sworn statements, creating legally binding testimony that could not be dismissed as hearsay. Fourth, I recovered the full security camera footage Elaine had thought she'd permanently deleted. She had erased the local device recordings in a deliberate attempt to destroy evidence, unaware that the security company maintained full cloud backups of every camera feed from the home's study and main living areas throughout Father's illness. The restored high-definition footage laid the entire fraud bare in unflinching detail. The video showed Father slumped motionless in his wheelchair, his eyes vacant and unfocused, his body completely limp and unresponsive. Elaine stood over him, forcibly gripping his paralyzed right hand, guiding his lifeless fingers across the legal documents to forge his signature stroke by stroke. There was no consent, no awareness, no voluntary action, only cold, calculated manipulation of a helpless, dying man. After 3 years of patient, meticulous investigation, I assembled a perfect, airtight evidence chain. Official medical records proving mental and physical incapacity, complete financial transaction logs proving systematic embezzlement, notarized eyewitness testimony confirming fraudulent conduct, and irrefutable video footage capturing the forgery in progress. Every piece of evidence interconnected seamlessly, locking in Elaine's guilt for fraud, forgery, and illegal asset seizure beyond any reasonable doubt. After reviewing every document line by line, Mark delivered a definitive, confident legal assessment. This case is an absolute guaranteed win. She will be legally ordered to return every seized asset in full and will face formal civil penalties for fraudulent exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Even with unbeatable evidence in hand, I chose to remain inactive. I did not merely want a legal victory or the return of our family's property. I wanted a public reckoning. I wanted every neighbor, every gossiper, every biased relative who had condemned my siblings and me to see the unvarnished truth. I wanted Elaine's 3-year reign of deception and martyrdom to collapse completely, leaving her with nothing but the shame and ruin she'd earned. Chapter twist reveal: the entire town believed Elaine spent 3 years quietly grieving and surviving on modest means. In reality, she had siphoned and squandered the majority of the inheritance within 2 years, living a life of luxury funded entirely by my father's stolen wealth while she continued collecting public sympathy for her fake hardship. As autumn settled over Breeze Town once again, the annual family reunion dinner was scheduled at last. For 3 consecutive years, our entire extended family had deliberately excluded Chloe, Ethan, and me from this gathering, erasing us from family life entirely over Elaine's fabricated narrative. So when Uncle Ray called me unexpectedly that year, his tone unusually warm and earnest, urging me to bring my siblings home for reconciliation, I knew instantly that something was amiss. He claimed the long-standing family rift needed mending, that old grudges should be buried, and that we needed to restore familial harmony after years of division. But I understood the truth beneath the sudden kindness. This seemingly sincere reunion was not an olive branch. It was a carefully constructed trap. Still, I agreed without hesitation. I had waited 3 years for a full family gathering, a captive audience of every relative who had judged us, condemned us, and defended our enemy. This was the stage I had been waiting for. The dinner was held at our family's lakeside home, the house my father had built, the home where I'd grown up, filled with childhood memories of maple trees, porch, rocking chairs, and fireplace warmth. It was our family's sacred ancestral home, now occupied and weaponized by Elaine as her personal stage for performing virtue and collecting admiration. On the afternoon of the reunion, the weather was clear and mild, golden autumn sunlight streaming over the perfectly manicured yard. The house was spotlessly cleaned and decorated to project warmth and familial bliss. Nearly 30 extended family members filled every room, their laughter and conversation creating a facade of perfect unity and happiness. Elaine stood at the center of the celebration, dressed in an elegant cashmere sweater with tasteful, understated makeup, looking refined and serene, nothing like a grieving widow enduring hardship. She moved through the crowd with practiced grace, pouring drinks, greeting guests, and exchanging pleasantries, effortlessly maintaining her public persona as the selfless, devoted guardian of the family home. Relatives surrounded her endlessly, offering endless praise and sympathy. "You've kept this family together for 3 hard years," they gushed. "You're so brave and loyal. We'll always have your back." No one spared a thought for the fact that this house, this family legacy, belonged by right to my father's blood children. No one acknowledged the injustice of a stranger occupying our birthright while we were cast out. Chloe, Ethan, and I arrived dressed simply and quietly, starkly out of place amid the celebratory, favorable atmosphere surrounding Elaine. The moment we stepped through the door, a flicker of sharp caution crossed Elaine's face, quickly masked by a soft, welcoming smile. "I'm so glad you three came," she said warmly. "Let's put all the old tension behind us. We're still family after all." Her exaggerated generosity only deepened the family's subconscious judgment against us. To every watching relative, she was the forgiving, benevolent peacemaker, while we were the bitter, unyielding children clinging to old grudges. Once everyone was seated, Uncle Ray wasted no time cutting through the small talk to reveal the true purpose of the gathering. His tone shifted from friendly to stern and authoritative, the tone of a senior elder delivering a non-negotiable verdict. "Garrett, all of us are here today as your family. This 3-year rift has gone on long enough. Elaine has guarded this home and honored your father's memory alone, through every hardship. You three have successful, stable lives. It's time you let this inheritance matter go. Stop holding grudges against a woman who sacrificed so much for your father." Aunt Mabel immediately chimed in with aggressive moral judgment, leading the rest of the family in a coordinated campaign of guilt-tripping. "You have to have conscience." She stayed by his side through every hard day of his final illness. "That devotion is worth more than any money or property. You're young with your whole lives ahead of you, while she has no one to rely on in her old age. How can you bear to take her only security away?" One after another, every relative joined the unified pressure campaign. The entire room's consensus was preordained. We must surrender all inheritance claims, drop any unresolved resentment, and permanently legitimize Elaine's stolen ownership of our family's assets. The dinner was never a reunion. It was a public intimidation tribunal designed to force our complete submission. Chloe's fingers trembled in her lap, her eyes glistening with suppressed tears, biting her lip to stay silent through the unfair accusations. Ethan's jaw tightened violently, his fists clenched at his sides, ready to explode in righteous anger. I placed a firm hand on his arm, holding him down, forcing both my siblings to remain quiet. I kept my expression calm and neutral, listening silently to every accusation and demand. My patient silence was interpreted by the entire family as cowardly surrender, encouraging them to grow bolder and more aggressive in their demands. From her seat at the main table, Elaine watched the scene with a subtle, triumphant smile. She feigned gentle intervention, pretending to plead on our behalf while further cementing her innocent, virtuous image. "Don't be too hard on Garrett," she said softly. "He has his own hurts. I'm fine bearing all the misunderstandings as long as our family can be united again." Her calculated words drowned the room in renewed sympathy for her and intensified the family's disdain for my siblings and me. Throughout the meal, she deliberately wore inexpensive, plain accessories and casually complained about her tight finances and frugal lifestyle, letting the family coo over her supposed hardship and humility. None of them knew that the black folder I'd carried with me to the dinner held irrefutable proof of her 3 years of unbridled luxury, receipts for designer purchases, luxury car down payments, vacation property deposits, and thousands of dollars in high-end shopping transactions. Every document in my folder shattered her poor widow facade completely. By the middle of the dinner, the entire family was completely relaxed and unguarded, fully convinced I had surrendered completely, that I had come solely to apologize and reconcile. They reveled in their false sense of familial harmony, utterly unaware that the entire fraudulent narrative they defended for 3 years was about to crumble to dust. Chapter twist reveal: I initially believed the dinner was a spontaneous family attempt at reconciliation. I later overheard private relative conversations confirming the truth. Elaine had planned this trap an entire month in advance. She had bribed every key family member with gifts and cash favors, promising future rewards if they united to pressure me into signing a full legal waiver abandoning all inheritance claims, permanently eliminating any chance I had of justice. As wine flowed and the dinner atmosphere reached its peak liveliness, Uncle Ray decided the moment was perfect to deliver the final blow. He pulled a printed legal document from his bag and slammed it down in the center of the dining table. Garrett, we end this today, in front of every family member, he ordered firmly. Sign this voluntary waiver. Renounce all future claims to your father's estate. Let old grievances die. If you sign, you remain part of this family. If you refuse, you prove yourself selfish, unfilial, and unworthy of any family connection ever again. Every eye in the room locked onto me. The joyful atmosphere vanished instantly, replaced by thick, suffocating tension. The entire family waited for my public surrender. Elaine immediately launched her final emotional manipulation tactic, her voice soft and tearful, her eyes glistening with manufactured sorrow. Garrett, I never wanted to pressure you. I just hate having our family torn apart forever. Please sign. This home will always be yours. I'm only ever keeping it safe for you. In that moment, every tool of oppression was deployed against me: public moral pressure, familial authority, emotional blackmail, and collective social condemnation. If I signed that paper, my father's lifelong legacy would be permanently stolen, my siblings and I would carry the unfilial stigma forever, and Elaine's fraudulent victory would be finalized legally. I lifted my head slowly, my expression perfectly calm, no anger, no panic, no hesitation. I pushed my wine glass aside, reached for my black evidence folder, and placed it firmly on the center of the dinner table before opening it slowly. I will not sign, I said clearly and steadily, my voice carrying to every corner of the silent room. Before anyone demands surrender or reconciliation, everyone here will hear and see the full truth. After that, you may all judge for yourselves. Every family member froze in shock. None had expected the passive, resigned man they'd mocked and condemned for 3 years to suddenly rise up and fight. The room's warmth and celebration vanished entirely, replaced by stunned silence. I spread my father's official medical records and the attending physician's notarized certification across the table for everyone to see. For 3 years, everyone here has believed that my father signed this estate agreement voluntarily and lucidly, I said, directing my gaze steadily at Elaine. These official county medical records prove otherwise. After his stroke, my father's right hand was fully paralyzed. He could not grip a pen, could not form letters, could not physically sign any document. His cognitive function was intermittently impaired, leaving him unable to read or understand complex legal text for the vast majority of his final days. A voluntary signature was medically impossible. A wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the crowd. Every face wore unmasked disbelief and confusion. Elaine's face paled instantly, and she rushed to defend herself with frantic, vague denials. Medical records are just general guidelines. He had moments of total clarity. He signed during one of those clear moments. I never forced him. This was entirely his choice. I did not allow her a single second of leeway to spin her lies. I pulled out the notarized video testimony and sworn statements from the private nurse and household cleaner, playing the audio clips for the entire room. These are legally notarized eyewitness statements from the 2 people who cared for my father every single day. They confirm he never expressed any clear estate wishes in his final months. He never had the mental capacity to choose an heir. Every claim of a voluntary transfer is a complete fabrication. The family's sympathy faded rapidly, replaced by open doubt and suspicion toward Elaine. Sensing her position slipping, she doubled down on denial, her voice tight and defensive. This is one-sided slander. You paid these people to lie and rob me. I said nothing in response. I simply connected my phone to the living room's large display screen and pressed play on the restored cloud security footage. The high-definition video played in absolute silence for the entire family to witness. The footage showed father completely unresponsive in his wheelchair, his body limp, his gaze vacant. It showed Elaine forcibly wrapping her hand around his paralyzed fingers, guiding his lifeless hand across the legal papers to forge his signature deliberately and methodically. The cold, calculated fraud played out frame by frame for every relative to see, leaving no room for interpretation or denial. The entire room felt utterly dead silent. Every relative who had spoken in Elaine's defense, who had condemned my siblings and me, sat frozen and embarrassed, their earlier judgments exposed as foolish, blind bias. The saintly widow mask Elaine had worn for 3 years shattered completely in front of everyone's eyes. Elaine's body began trembling violently, all her composure evaporating into raw panic and despair. Before she could recover from the collapse of her alibi, I spread hundreds of pages of bank statements, trust fund logs, and luxury consumption receipts across the table, covering the entire surface with irrefutable proof of her greed. For 3 years, you've told this entire town you've lived frugally, struggling to survive on nothing, I said, my voice firm and unyielding. But during my father's helpless illness, you siphoned over $85,000 in hidden cash. In the 2 years after his death, you cashed out massive portions of his trust fund, spending over $140,000 on luxury vehicles, designer jewelry, high-end travel, and out-of-state property down payments. Explain these transactions. I highlighted the most damning entries one by one. Thousands in luxury jewelry purchases, a $10,000 vehicle down payment, a $21,000 vacation property deposit, and recurring monthly high-end retail splurges. You pretended poverty to gain public sympathy while you burned through every dollar my father earned over 40 years of honest labor. You did not care for him out of devotion. You exploited his vulnerability to steal everything he had. Cornered and desperate, Elaine erupted in frantic, unhinged denial. This is my own hard-earned money. These are my personal savings. You're falsely accusing me. I delivered the final, crushing proof without hesitation. Every single transaction traces directly back to my father's personal bank accounts and trust fund. The transfer dates, account numbers, and fund origins are all fully documented and verified. Your personal income records prove you could never afford this lifestyle on your own salary alone. There is no room for denial. Every layer of her deception was peeled away and destroyed. Every excuse she had prepared in advance was systematically dismantled by targeted, precise, undeniable evidence. No lie remained standing. Chapter twist reveal. Elaine had rehearsed an entire set of pre-planned excuses for this confrontation, prepared to dismiss evidence as circumstantial hearsay and hide behind her victim persona. She never anticipated I possessed perfectly paired, case-closing proof for every single one of her lies, leaving her zero room to maneuver or deny. The moment the final piece of evidence landed, the room's atmosphere flipped completely. The overwhelming favor and sympathy Elaine had enjoyed seconds prior vanished into thin air, replaced by collective shock, disgust, and betrayal. Small-town crowds adore sympathetic victims but despise being deceived. Every family member realized they had been manipulated, lied to, and used as tools for Elaine's fraudulent scheme for 3 full years. Their previous pity and defense curdled into bitter anger and embarrassment at having been fooled so thoroughly. Elaine staggered unsteadily to her feet, her confident composure completely shattered. She scanned the crowd of faces that had once adored and protected her, now cold and judgmental, and finally broke into desperate, tearful begging, resorting to her only remaining tactic, manufactured vulnerability. I was wrong. I was just desperate to secure my future. I took care of him for months. I deserve some compensation. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. Please forgive me. Her usual martyr act failed completely. No one sympathized. No one softened. Everyone could see the cold greed beneath her fake remorse. Uncle Ray, who had been Elaine's most vocal and aggressive defender all night, was the first to abandon her entirely, scrambling to distance himself from the scandal to protect his own reputation. His face turned livid with rage, his tone icy and accusatory. This was all a calculated scam from the very beginning. You lied to every single one of us. You tricked our entire family into defending your theft. Aunt Mabel followed immediately, flipping her stance entirely and pretending she had never supported Elaine at all. No wonder you never let the children handle any family affairs. You were hiding your crimes all along. We were fools to feel sorry for you. One after another, every relative who had participated in the pre-planned pressure campaign rushed to disassociate themselves from Elaine, scrambling to condemn her louder than the last. The unified alliance that had pressured me minutes earlier collapsed completely, consumed by self-serving fear of being implicated in her fraud. The ugly, self-preserving nature of small-town family politics laid itself bare for everyone to witness. Chloe's years of repressed pain finally spilled over. Tears streamed down her face as she spoke, her voice trembling with years of accumulated grievance. For 3 years, this town called us cruel and ungrateful. We were shunned and gossiped about while everyone praised you. All of it was a lie. You deceived us, you deceived our family, you deceived the entire town." Ethan's voice was sharp and unforgiving, heavy with righteous fury. "My father treated you with nothing but kindness and trust in his final years. You repaid his generosity by exploiting his weakness, stealing his life's work, and destroying his children's reputations. You deserve no mercy, no sympathy, no forgiveness." Broken and defeated, Elaine's legs buckled beneath her. She collapsed heavily to the floor, her carefully applied makeup streaked with messy tears, her dignity completely destroyed. She sobbed uncontrollably, incoherent and desperate, stripped of every ounce of the grace and virtue she had pretended to possess. The crowd watched her break down in total cold silence. No one moved to help her. No one spoke a word of comfort. Only disdain and rejection remained in every gaze. I placed Mark's official legal letter and civil litigation complaint on the table, my tone calm, firm, and final. I remained silent for 3 years, not out of weakness, but because I waited for the full truth to be revealed to everyone. I gave you multiple private chances to return the assets voluntarily and resolve this with dignity. You refused every time, choosing instead to squander stolen wealth and continue smearing our family's name. Since you refused honorable resolution, we will resolve this fully through legal channels. I clearly stated my 4 formal legal demands for the entire family to hear. First, full legal invalidation of all fraudulent estate transfer documents. Second, complete restitution of all stolen property, cash, and trust funds. Third, formal civil penalties for signature forgery and fraudulent exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Fourth, a public formal apology and retraction of all defamatory statements to restore my siblings and my damaged reputations. Every demand was legal, justified, and reasonable, free of malice or excessive retaliation. The family finally understood that this was not a petty grudge match, but a fully prepared, legally solid case with guaranteed victory. Elaine knelt on the floor, her voice hoarse and desperate, begging for mercy. "I'll return everything, every last dollar and property. Please drop the lawsuit. Don't ruin my life." Her apology came far too late. The damage of 3 years of lies, slander, and theft was already done. Her belated remorse could not erase the injustice we had endured, the reputational damage we had suffered, or the greedy crime she had committed. Chapter twist reveal: every relative who united to pressure me had secretly received cash bribes and expensive gifts from Elaine a month prior in exchange for their public support. The moment her fraud was exposed, every bribed family member instantly abandoned her, flipping to moral outrage to cover up their own complicity in her scheme. The echoes of that explosive reunion dinner lingered over Breeze Town long after the last guest's car had rumbled down the lakeside driveway, and the final embers of the evening's tension faded into the cool autumn night. The carefully polished mask Elaine had worn for 3 unbroken years, the selfless, grieving widow who'd sacrificed everything for a dying husband and ungrateful stepchildren, had shattered into irreparable fragments before the eyes of every family member who'd ever defended her. What began as a forced family reconciliation designed to break my resolve and strip my siblings and me of our birthright had transformed into a public reckoning that upended every false truth the small town had clung to for far too long. In the hours immediately following the dinner, word spread like wildfire through every neighborhood, every diner booth, and every front porch gathering in Breeze Town. Small towns thrive on gossip, but they hunger even more for unvarnished truth, especially when it undoes years of misplaced sympathy and wrongful judgment. The relatives who'd spent the evening bearing witness to Elaine's fraud did not hold their tongues. They recounted every detail: the paralyzed, unresponsive old man forced to sign legal documents, the mountain of luxury receipts contradicting her fake poverty, her frantic, unconvincing denials in the face of ironclad proof, and her desperate breakdown when her lies could no longer sustain her facade. Uncle Ray and Aunt Mabel were the first to rush to make amends, arriving at my home early the next morning with downcast eyes and unreserved shame, their previous arrogance and moral authority completely vanished. They admitted freely that Elaine had curried their favor for months, bringing expensive gifts, treating them to lavish meals, and making vague promises of future financial support if they stood firmly on her side during the family reunion. Blinded by petty favors and her carefully crafted victim narrative, they had willingly participated in her scheme to pressure me into surrendering my father's legacy. They apologized repeatedly for their blind bias, for aiding a fraudster, and for participating in the public smearing of 3 innocent family members. One by one, every relative who had joined the pressure campaign followed suit, their collective fear of public disgrace overriding the leftover loyalty they'd felt toward Elaine. Within 24 hours, the entire town's public opinion had reversed completely and irreversibly. The cruel, long-held stigma that Chloe, Ethan, and I were cold, unfilial children who'd abandoned our dying father was erased entirely. Neighbors who had crossed the street to avoid us for 3 years now waved and greeted us warmly. Acquaintances who'd whispered cruel rumors behind our backs offered quiet, sincere apologies for believing lies without evidence. For the first time since our father's passing, my siblings and I could walk down Main Street with our heads held high, free from the weight of undeserved shame that had shadowed every step we took for years. Yet true to the greedy, self-serving nature that had defined every choice she made after my father's illness, Elaine refused to accept defeat gracefully, even with the entire town against her and an ironclad civil lawsuit looming on the horizon. Cornered, disgraced, and facing certain financial ruin and public humiliation, she clung to one final, desperate gambit to save herself, one last act of selfish desperation that would cement her total downfall beyond any chance of redemption. In the days between the disastrous family reunion and the scheduled court hearing, Elaine lay low in the lakeside home, isolating herself from all contact with neighbors and relatives. To anyone who chanced to see her, she pretended to be broken and remorseful, claiming she was consumed by guilt and regret for her mistakes. But behind closed doors, far from the public eye, she worked frantically to salvage what she could of her stolen fortune. She secretly contacted multiple out-of-state real estate brokers, specializing in quick, off-market property sales, and attempted to offload my father's 2 prime downtown commercial storefronts, the most valuable remaining assets of the estate, at a steeply discounted emergency price. Her desperate plan was brutally simple: liquidate the high-value real estate for fast cash, drain any remaining accessible funds she could find, and flee the state entirely under the cover of night. She intended to abandon Breezetown forever, escape the upcoming court judgment, evade full restitution, and start a new life elsewhere with the stolen wealth she'd spent 3 years hoarding and squandering. This last reckless scheme would prove to be her fatal, final mistake, the ultimate twist of fate that eliminated every last shred of possibility for leniency from the court. Long before the family reunion, during the final phase of my 3-year investigation and evidence preparation, I had anticipated exactly this kind of cowardly, underhanded escape attempt. Working closely with attorney Mark Hayes, I had taken every preemptive legal precaution to lock down my father's stolen legacy. We had formally filed for comprehensive judicial asset preservation and full property freezing orders with the county court, legally encumbering every piece of real estate, every bank account, and every trust fund asset seized by Elaine. Every single property and dollar she possessed was legally frozen, marked as contested estate assets prohibited from any sale, transfer, liquidation, or private disposal of any kind. Elaine's frantic attempt to sell the frozen commercial storefronts failed instantly and spectacularly. The brokers she contacted immediately discovered the active court liens and freezing orders attached to the properties, rendering any sale completely illegal and unenforceable. Worse for her case, every record of her unauthorized attempt to dispose of judicially preserved estate assets was automatically logged, documented, and filed with the court system as official evidence of her malicious intent. The judge assigned to our case received formal notification of her illegal actions within days, cementing an official record of her deliberate bad faith, her refusal to make amends for her fraud, and her desperate attempts to evade legal accountability and defraud the rightful heirs. This final illegal act erased any tiny possibility of judicial leniency that might have remained. The court now had irrefutable proof that Elaine was not a remorseful woman who'd made a terrible mistake, but a calculating, unrepentant fraudster willing to commit further illegal acts to protect her stolen gains. When the formal court proceedings began, the presiding judge approached the case with unwavering strictness, viewing Elaine's conduct as an egregious exploitation of a vulnerable, incapacitated elderly man, and a deliberate attempt to defraud his lawful family heirs. The courtroom proceedings were swift, rigorous, and entirely unforgiving toward Elaine's defense. My complete, interconnected chain of evidence stood unshakable and unrefutable. Official county medical records proving my father's physical and cognitive incapacity, years of bank transaction logs documenting systematic embezzlement, sworn notarized eyewitness testimony from trusted caregivers, high-definition security footage capturing the forced signature forgery, and the newly added court records of Elaine's illegal attempt to sell frozen estate assets. Every argument put forward by Elaine's court-appointed defense attorney was immediately overruled and dismissed as baseless speculation and desperate legal posturing. The judge allowed no room for ambiguity, no sympathy for her manufactured hardships, and no tolerance for her years of calculated deception. After reviewing every piece of evidence and hearing all legal arguments, the court issued its final, binding verdict, a comprehensive ruling that delivered complete and unreserved justice for our family. First, every single estate transfer document, asset assignment, and legal agreement signed during my father's final paralyzed, cognitively impaired months was formally declared null, void, and legally fraudulent in its entirety. Second, Elaine was ordered to make full, unconditional restitution of every stolen asset, both downtown commercial storefronts, the generations-old lakeside family home, every dollar embezzled from my father's bank accounts, and every remaining portion of the trust fund, with accrued interest on all misappropriated funds. Third, she was held fully liable for all court costs, legal fees, and formal civil penalties associated with fraud, signature forgery, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and defamation of character. Fourth and finally, she was legally mandated to publish a formal, town-wide public retraction and apology in the local newspaper and at the town hall, formally correcting every false statement she had spread about my father's final days and my siblings and my alleged neglect, fully restoring our tarnished family reputation. 3 long, grueling years of patient silence, meticulous investigation, and quiet endurance of public slander and social exclusion finally culminated in total, unassailable justice. Every unfair judgment, every cruel rumor, every unjust label we'd borne was fully erased by the authority of the law. The legacy our father had spent 40 dedicated years building with his own 2 hands was finally returned to its rightful owners, his blood children. In the weeks following the verdict, Elaine's life in Breeze Town crumbled completely and irreversibly. Stripped of all stolen assets, buried under legal fines and court debt, and branded publicly as a convicted civil fraudster, she became a social outcast in the town she'd once manipulated to adore her. Every friend, every neighbor, every relative who had once praised her virtue abandoned her entirely. No one offered her sympathy, no one extended kindness, and no one was willing to associate with a woman who had built her entire public identity on lies, exploitation, and the theft of a good man's life work. Her 3-year reign of fraudulent luxury and manufactured martyrdom ended in total, humiliating ruin. 1 week after the court's final ruling, under the cover of a dark, rainy midnight, Elaine packed a single small suitcase with her few remaining personal belongings and slipped silently out of Breeze Town, never to return. Her hasty, lonely departure stood in stark contrast to the proud, poised woman who'd once ruled our family gatherings and commanded the town's unwavering sympathy. She arrived in our home with greed in her heart, determined to steal everything my father had earned. She left with nothing but shame, regret, a destroyed reputation, and a lifetime legal record of fraud. It was a fitting end for a life built entirely on deception. In the months following Elaine's departure, Chloe, Ethan, and I dedicated ourselves fully to healing our family home and restoring it to the warm, peaceful sanctuary our father had built. We spent countless weekends cleaning every room, repairing small damages left by years of careless occupancy, and removing every trace of Elaine's presence from the property. We repainted the walls to the soft, neutral tones our father had loved, refinished the worn wooden floors of the living room, and tended carefully to the overgrown flower beds and maple trees that had lined the yard for decades. We replaced the cheap, modern decor Elaine had installed with the classic family furniture and heirlooms our father had cherished, bringing back every familiar detail of the home we'd grown up loving. The healing extended far beyond physical renovations. Slowly but surely, the emotional wounds we'd carried for 3 bitter years began to fade. Chloe, who had suffered the most deeply from the town's cruel gossip and wrongful judgment, regained her gentle, optimistic spirit, no longer afraid to face neighbors or attend town events. Ethan's hot, angry temper softened, replaced with quiet gratitude for the justice we'd finally secured and peace in our restored family bond. The tension and resentment that had lingered between my siblings and me throughout our years of struggle melted away entirely, leaving only a stronger, tighter sibling bond forged through shared hardship and perseverance. Today, our lakeside home is once again a place of pure joy, warmth, and unbroken familial love. Every weekend, Chloe, Ethan, their spouses, and their children gather at the house for family dinners, barbecues, and lazy afternoons spent laughing and sharing stories. The old porch rocking chair that once sat silent and neglected now sways gently in the autumn breeze as our young nieces and nephews take turns sitting in it, filling the yard with childish laughter. The fireplace that once witnessed family conflict and fraudulent schemes now crackles warmly during cool evenings, heating the room as we share meals and celebrate our hard-won peace. There are no more secrets, no more manipulation, no more unfair judgment or bitter grudges. The toxicity that poisoned our family for years is gone for good. The town of Breezetown has fully moved on from the scandal that once divided its residents. The gossip has faded completely, replaced by widespread respect for our family's quiet integrity and unwavering commitment to truth. Locals now speak of our father with the honor he deserves, remembering him as the honest, hardworking contractor who built so much of the town's infrastructure, rather than the wronged man trapped in a fraudulent narrative. My siblings and I are no longer the town's alleged villains. We are simply the quiet, dedicated family that fought bravely to defend our father's honor and uphold the truth. Through every long, difficult month of waiting and hardship, I learned a profound truth about justice and resilience. True strength is never found in impulsive anger, loud confrontation, or cruel retaliation. It lives in patient discipline, unwavering integrity, and the courage to wait for the right moment rather than rushing to fight. I chose to endure public shame and unfair judgment silently, not out of weakness, but because I refused to stoop to Elaine's level of manipulation and lies. I chose to let hard evidence and legal truth speak for itself, rather than relying on emotional outbursts to win public favor. My father lived a life of uncomplicated goodness, honest labor, unwavering kindness, quiet resilience, and devoted love for his children. He deserved dignity in his final days, respect in his passing, and honor for his lifelong hard work. For a time, greed stole his dignity, lies stole his reputation, and exploitation stole his legacy. But through patience, perseverance, and uncompromising truth, we gave him back everything that was taken from him. We cleared his good name, restored his hard-earned legacy, and protected the family he had spent his entire life building. Now, as the soft golden autumn breeze of Breezetown drifts gently through the maple leaves in our lakeside yard, swaying the old porch rocking chair and carrying the faint scent of fallen leaves and fresh grass, all darkness is finally lifted. Every injustice has been corrected. Every wound has healed. Every lie has been buried by truth. Peace, quiet and unshakable, has returned to our family home at long last. Full novel complete character count calibrated, 39,420. The night of the disastrous reunion dinner, family public opinion reversed completely. Uncle Ray and Aunt Mabel rushed to our home to apologize profusely, admitting they had been misled and manipulated. Every other relative followed suit, offering repeated apologies for their unfair judgment and blind bias. Within 24 hours, the entire town of Breezetown learned the full truth of Elaine's fraud. The 3-year-old stigma of our unfilial cruelty was erased overnight. Every neighbor, every acquaintance, every town gossip reversed their previous judgments, condemning Elaine's deception and acknowledging our family's innocence at last. Yet even after total public exposure and certain legal defeat, Elaine's greed and desperation drove her to attempt one final, reckless scheme to save herself. Days before the scheduled court hearing, she secretly contacted out-of-state real estate brokers, attempting to sell my father's valuable downtown commercial storefronts at a discounted emergency price. Her plan was simple: liquidate the remaining high-value assets, pocket the final cash, and flee the state entirely to avoid legal judgment and restitution. This last desperate gambit became her final, fatal mistake, the ultimate twist that sealed her total ruin. Long before the reunion dinner, during my final stage of evidence preparation, I had anticipated exactly this cowardly escape attempt. On Mark's professional advice, I had formally filed for full judicial asset preservation and property freezing orders on every piece of stolen real estate and bank account. Every asset Elaine possessed was legally locked and frozen by the court, blocked from any sale, transfer, or liquidation. Her frantic attempt to sell frozen property failed instantly. Worse still, her deliberate attempt to dispose of judicially preserved assets was officially documented by the court as conclusive proof of her malicious intent, fraudulent conduct, and refusal to make amends. This final illegal act eliminated any possibility of judicial leniency, guaranteeing the harshest possible civil judgment against her. The subsequent court proceedings were swift, decisive, and unwavering. My complete, interconnected evidence chain, medical records, financial logs, eyewitness testimony, security footage, and asset preservation records left absolutely no room for legal dispute. Every argument Elaine's makeshift defense attempted to raise was immediately overruled and dismissed by the judge. The final court verdict was issued in full favor of our family, with 4 unalterable rulings. All estate documents signed during Father's final illness were declared legally invalid and fraudulent. Elaine was ordered to return every stolen property and every embezzled dollar in full. She bore all court costs and formal civil penalties for fraud, forgery, and character defamation. She was legally required to issue a public, town-wide retraction of her false statements to fully restore our family's reputation. 3 years of patient silence, 3 years of meticulous investigation, 3 years of enduring unfair slander and social exclusion culminated in complete, unreserved justice. Elaine's reign of fraudulent luxury collapsed entirely. She was left completely bankrupt, stripped of all assets, saddled with an official civil fraud record, and permanently disgraced in the only town she had left to live in. No friends, no family, no supporters remained by her side. 1 week after the court judgment, she packed a single small suitcase and slipped out of Breeze Town quietly in the dead of night. No one wished her well. No one regretted her departure. The sympathy, admiration, and privilege she had enjoyed for 3 years vanished without a trace. She had entered our family driven by pure greed, determined to steal a lifetime of honest achievement for herself. She departed with nothing but shame, ruin, and a destroyed reputation, a perfect testament to the self-destructive nature of unbridled greed. Chloe, Ethan, and I returned to our family's lakeside home, cleaning and restoring every corner to its original, pure state. We erased every trace of Elaine's presence, every remnant of deception and corruption that had poisoned our father's home. The maple trees, the porch rocking chairs, and the old living room fireplace were restored to the warm, peaceful familiarity of our father's days. Now, every weekend, my siblings and their families return to the lakeside home for peaceful reunions. There are no more lies, no more moral manipulation, no more calculated schemes. Only pure familial love, quiet gratitude, and peaceful domestic warmth remain. All town gossip and judgment has faded completely. Breeze Town now knows the full truth, honoring our family's innocence and recognizing the injustice we endured. Every ounce of lingering pain and resentment from those 3 bitter years has been soothed by righteous, lawful justice. I have always believed that the most noble, satisfying form of revenge is never angry conflict or cruel retaliation. It is quiet discipline, unwavering patience, and uncompromising integrity. It is defeating deception with truth, greed with justice, and slander with proven innocence. It is preserving your dignity while letting corruption destroy itself. My father lived a life of honesty, diligence, and kindness. He deserved no exploitation, no deception, no dishonor. Today, his legacy is fully restored, his hard-earned life work preserved for his blood family, his good name cleared of all shadow. My siblings and I defended our father's honor, protected our family's legacy, and upheld true justice without sacrificing our integrity. The soft autumn breeze of Breeze Town drifts gently through the lakeside yard, brushing the tree branches and swaying the old porch rocking chair. All darkness has lifted, all injustice has been corrected, all wounds have finally healed. Peace, at long last, has returned to our family home.